It's time, Cougar Nation. Cougar Tracks. The best season analysis with BYU insider Mitch Harper on KSL NewsRadio and on video every day on the YouTube page for KSL Sports.
Welcome into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL NewsRadio, your legacy home of the Cougars. It's a Tuesday edition of Cougar Tracks, and I am your BYU insider, Mitch Harper. BYU basketball is back in action, and they are taking center stage at the Mecca, and that's where we start things off on today's show.
The top story of the day. The biggest story in the world of BYU sports right here on Cougar Tracks.
Number 10, BYU versus Clemson in the Jimmy V Classic at Madison Square Garden. Tip-off at 4:30 p.m. today. Pre-game begins at 3:30 on KSL NewsRadio. BYU enters this game ranked number 10 in the AP Top 25. They dropped one spot. But of note, though, they are in the most important AP Top 25 of the year. The Week 6 AP Top 25, the last 21 years, has produced a national champion within the top 12. Arizona's number 1, fellow Big 12 team. Michigan 2, Duke 3, Iowa State, who is on a tear. They're undefeated. They're at number 4. UConn, who BYU lost to in Boston, number 5. Purdue at 6. Another Big 12 team at Houston, number 7. 8 is Gonzaga. 9, Michigan State. 10, BYU. 11, Louisville. And 12, Alabama. Someone within that 12 teams is going to win the national title, at least history would say, over the last 20 years. And I think this poll does give you a bit of context because you've got the Feast Week games in the rearview mirror. You've seen all these teams play some pretty good competition, primarily in MTEs or neutral site floors. That's been the case for BYU. BYU has lived in NBA arenas really this whole entire season thus far. They've only had 2 games at the Marriott Center. They haven't had any true road games. It's all been neutral floors for the most part for BYU. But BYU, one of 12 teams in maybe the most important poll of the year. And this goes all the way back to 2003, 2004, when UConn cut down the nets in San Antonio, and it's consistently lived up to that stat where the top 12 teams within the Week 6 of the AP Top 25, someone emerges as the national champion. And it's crazy to think, too, that within the Big 12, there are 4 teams in that top 12, and BYU is the 4th best. The Big 12 is the best league in college basketball, no question about it. And BYU tonight going up against an ACC team. Remember a couple years ago, Clemson head coach Brad Brownell, he went on the attack of the Big 12 saying they game the system and that's why they get all these bids while the ACC gets disrespected. Well, BYU has a chance to show the strength of the Big 12 to Clemson, an ACC team who had a little bit of travel issues, it appeared, last night. They were going through a walkthrough in a hangar on their flight to New York City. They went through shoot-around today at MSG, as did BYU. But this is a good test for BYU going up against a Clemson team that's a top 25 Ken Pom squad. They're number 25, while BYU is number 9 in the Ken Pom ratings. I look at this game, though. BYU's got way more talent than Clemson. There's a lot of connections, though, to Clemson with BYU, at least familiarity when it comes to Clemson's roster this season. They've got former BYU signee Jake Wallin, who his father, Rick Wallin, played football at BYU, and obviously his brother-in-law, too, Harvey Longy, former BYU football standout. So Jake Wallin is a player to watch. He's been in the starting 5 for Clemson this season. I remember when he was coming out of Timpview, I was at his commitment day announcement. He was at this secret gym. Yoli Childs was there. And Yoli, I remember, was telling me this guy's going to be really good in college basketball. I think he kind of got slept on a bit. I really wish that he could have ended up at BYU, but he goes to Utah after serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Lithuania. goes to the University of Utah. Now he's at Clemson. And I think this Clemson team has a chance to be an NCAA tournament squad this year. So you got Wallin, who's got familiarity with BYU, being a Provo hometown kid. And then Carter Welling, former UVU center, WAC Defensive Player of the Year a season ago. He played AAU ball with Richie Saunders, and he was a high school teammate with Brody Kozlowski at Corner Canyon. He served a mission for the church. And then another player that's got maybe a little bit of familiarity with BYU, Nick Davidson, a transfer from Nevada. His late father, Kirk Davidson, who tragically passed away this past spring due to a heart attack, he was a former BYU basketball player under Roger Reed in the late 90s or early 90s, so 89 to 90. Kirk Davidson, father to Nick Davidson, a Nevada transfer. He played at BYU back in the day. So some unique connections that you would never expect with Clemson basketball all the way out in South Carolina. This is the first regular season meeting between BYU and Clemson. Two prior meetings were in the NCAA tournament, once in 1990 in Connecticut. That was a heartbreaker, a last-second miss. I'm sure Mark Durant's going to talk about it tonight on the call because I believe he was on the alley-oop to Marty Haas and then couldn't make the basket. That was, BYU's backbreakers in the NCAA tournament. And then they lost two in Ogden with Danny Ainge. As Danny Ainge's junior year in 1980, they lost to Clemson as well. The 1990 game against Clemson featured Eldon Campbell, who passed away recently, earlier this month on December 1st. Clemson's honoring Eldon Campbell, who's the all-time leading scorer in Clemson basketball history. So all that to be said, that I think this is a really cool matchup. I think it's another good test for BYU in a grand stage of Madison Square Garden. AJ DeBonsa, there's been billboards of him in New York City from Nike. BYU was practicing at the Nike New York City headquarters with draft analysts on hand to watch practice as BYU prepares for a big game tonight, 4:30 tip on ESPN, pregame at 3:30. I really want to see AJ have a big game at MSG. You think about some of these star players in the NBA over the years, when they have a big game at the Mecca, it's just a huge story. This type of stage could make AJ an even bigger than life star than he already is. You know, if AJ goes off for 25, 30 points at the Mecca, man, college basketball will be buzzing. The basketball world in general would be buzzing about that. And look, AJ's not looking necessarily for that. He is a team first guy. And I think that's been one of the really interesting things to watch with AJ this year. So I think everyone thinks, five-star guy, it's going to be about him, but he's really been all about the team. Sometimes I want to see him just take it over in these games, but he truly is a team-first guy. But it would be fun to see him just go off for a big game tonight inside the Mecca at MSG. BYU needs to impose its style of play on Clemson. You know, Clemson wants to slow it down a lot more. Do what Alabama did in Clemson's last outing out in Tuscaloosa in the ACC SEC Challenge. Get that thing up and down the floor. I don't think Clemson's defense is as good as maybe a couple years ago when they made a run to the Elite Eight. I think BYU's tempo can get this thing up and down the floor and just get it playing to their style of play, similar to the Wisconsin game. I think that would be the blueprint ideally for what you could do here against Clemson if you can impose your style of play. And look, Wisconsin likes to get up and down too, but much more than Clemson. But I still think if you can get to that style of play in this game, I think this will bode quite well for BYU. And I think you got to get off to a fast start as well. Get off to a fast start, which have been at times an issue. It was a strong start against Cal Baptist last Wednesday. Headband Keba Keita had a career-high 23 points. He was fantastic. He is outstanding around the rim and had a huge game with Headband Keita holding it down in the post. But he also got to take care of the glass, though, too. So get off to a fast start and clean up on the glass because Clemson, they are pretty good at rebound margin. They're 28th nationally, 9.8 rebound margin this season. And also, too, Clemson, one of the better teams nationally in assist to turnover ratio, 20th in college hoops at 1.81 in assist to turnover ratio. So they don't turn the ball over. So you got to value those possessions. And if they do impose their style of play, making it a half-court game, that could shrink the possessions and make this thing a little bit tighter than it needs to be. But I think BYU's the better team, and they've got the more talented roster in this one. I think BYU wins this game. They take care of business and get another quality resume win against an Clemson team that I think could be a bubble squad. I watched them a couple weeks back when they played Georgia and Cannon Catchings. They won the Charleston MTE. I was flying, I believe, from Cincinnati to Florida. I was watching that game on a Sunday. BYU football played Cincinnati, and I was flying out to Florida to spend the week to get ready for BYU basketball's MTE. And I was watching that game, and Cannon Catchings, former BYU player, was there for Georgia, and he didn't play much late, even in the overtime period, whereas guys like Jake Wallin were having a real impact on this Clemson team. And I'm curious to see, what type of impact they have. Clemson's got a team that's pretty balanced. There's not one go-to guy. BYU's got three go-to guys with AJ, with Rob Wright, with Richie Saunders. Clemson doesn't really have that. It's pretty balanced, evenly distributed on the scoring. RJ Godfrey, probably a point two, is maybe their top guy. True shooting percentage at 70% this season. He's averaging about 12 points per game. He boomeranged his way, started at Clemson, went to Georgia, then worked his way back to Clemson. 6'7", 240 pounds. But they have a lot of different guys that could be their top scorer. And this is a Clemson team, too, that for this program under Brad Brownell, very different operation in terms of roster construction, where it's a portal overhaul. Not much retention from last year. They did, however, retain their starting point guard in Dylan Hunter, who really kind of turned the corner last year when they had that big win at home against number one Duke. They stormed the floor. That was a big victory for Clemson last season. Dylan Hunter's their starting point guard. He's a pretty good player. So that'll be a good matchup between Rob Wright and Dylan Hunter, and one to watch. But I think Clemson's relatively had a light non-conference schedule. You look at the Ken Palm metrics, sub 200 in non-con rating, while BYU, top 20 schedule thus far. BYU's been much more battle-tested than Clemson. This is a big step up, I think, for the Tigers. But again, they're a really solid team. And I think BYU has got to play well and jump off to a fast start and impose its tempo. And I think this will be a good night for BYU at the Mecca at MSG. Tip off again at 4:30. I'll have a post-game reaction show here on Cougar Tracks coming up a little bit later tonight. Let's take a break. Get to BYU football talk. What are the biggest needs for the Cougars in the transfer portal coming up in the 2026 cycle? We'll hit on that next here on Cougar Tracks. Welcome back into Cougar Tracks here on the KSL Sports YouTube page. Every day, even with football season over, I know there's still one game left, but even with the football season, the regular season in the rearview mirror, we're going every single day talking BYU sports here on Cougar Tracks on the KSL Sports YouTube and KSL News Radio, your legacy home of the Cougars. And the transfer portal is an important deal this week, as Kalani Sitake and his program look to really identify the players that intend to go to the portal coming up in January, which opens up January 2nd and runs through January 16th. Players' intentions to go into that portal, as a coaching staff for Kalani and his crew, they need to know who's in, who's out. One player has already informed his intentions of entering the portal coming up in January. That's freshman wide receiver LaMason Waller III, a signee in the class of 2025. Made really no dent in terms of the rotation at wide receiver in fall camp. You knew he was a developmental guy. Was going to be someone I thought could be a good player, and I think he'll have a nice career in college football, but he's going to be going portaling coming up in January. So this time before bowl practices really heat up, You want to nail down who the players that are in, who's out, and really figure that out so you can start building out that 2026 roster, because unlike recent years, there's no spring portal. So that's January 2nd to January 16th. That is the only time players can go into the portal. And once that window is gone, it's over. And of course, you can add players once they're in the portal between January 2nd and January 16th. You could add as many players as you need to within the roster guidelines set by the NCAA and RevShare. You can add as many players throughout as long as you need to get your roster put in place, but you'll have a clear idea of who's in and who's out. Whereas in years past, you go to spring ball and then you have a sudden departure of Keelan Marion. That's not going to be a thing after spring ball this year. It's only one portal window, which I think is great. I think it's outstanding to have only one window. Now, I think I would have liked it maybe to be in the spring window potentially. I mean, I'm also okay with 2 windows. I thought it was fine, but I can get on board with just one window, because then you can really start to forecast these teams and really start to project for 2026 what they're going to look like when you know who's in and who's out with only one portal window. But for BYU, their portal needs, to me, it starts with running back. You've obviously got to figure out the LJ Martin situation. Will he be going to the NFL, or is he going to run it back for his senior campaign next season? To me, if you're LJ, I think your stock is probably the highest it's going to be, being the Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year. And if you could get a 4th round grade from an NFL evaluator, I think you probably got to go. Even if you're a 5th round guy in the NFL, you probably got to go, because the running back position, if you're a 5th round, 4th round guy, that's pretty good value for a running back. You don't expect 1st round. 2nd round's got more action for running backs in recent drafts, but 4th to 5th round, if you can get that grade, I think you go if you're LJ Martin. The risk, though, that you always fear, especially now where you can earn a lot of money at college football, is you declare early and then you're waiting on day 3 and it's the 6th round and it's like, now it's priority undrafted free agent territory. I think LJ would be drafted, but you just never know. And if the combine doesn't play out the way that you hope, again, you never know. Whereas confidently, you're going to probably be taken care of at BYU. You're going to stretch your earning potential. The problem is, though, how do you follow up a Big 12 Offensive Player of the Year season and level it up? Maybe level it up by getting BYU to the playoff next year. That's the way to do that and really showcase yourself and try to stay healthy for an entire season. Still, LJ has played every game. Even though that Texas Tech game in November, he was not healthy, he has played every game this season. But running back's got to be huge because, you got Sione Moa, who made his return in the Big 12 championship game, and that's great. But outside of LJ Martin, you have no one you turn to and say, that is the number one guy. And personally, I think Sione Moa is a better RB2 than he is RB1. And he's been too injured the last 2 years to say confidently you can say he's RB1. You got Preston Rex, you got Lucky Finau, Charles Miska, Sione Moa, Javesa Namouni, Logan Payne, Devon Eka. You need more. Portal running backs galore, please. I think you also need an X receiver, a split end who can, line up outside. BYU's got good slot receivers, guys that can handle the jet sweeps, the Parker Kingstons, and Parker might be BYU's number 1 wide receiver next year. But you need some guys that can line up outside. And the way that they've utilized some of the receivers this year, I just haven't seen enough to say that they're going to be utilized that way. I think Cody Hagan could be that outside receiver. I think that, JoJo Phillips could be that guy, but JoJo's had a really up and down year this season. Reggie Frischnecht, we'll see. It was a redshirt year this year. Got some playing time, though. He even started in the Big 12 championship game. You got Dominic McKenzie. You got Trey Roberts, another slot guy. Terrence Sirion, a 5'10", 5'11" guy. He comes into the program. Legend Glasker joins the team. Jet Nilsson off a mission. He's a big-bodied guy, but Tiger Bachmeier as well. Still, I think he needs some outside receivers to come into this receiver unit and bring more competition to that group for BYU next season. I think you also need a backup quarterback. We'll see what happens with the quarterback situation after Bear Bachmeier this offseason. You know, you would think that probably a McKay Hillstead looks at the portal potentially. And look, Big 12 championship game, Bear is clearly hobbled. He is limping throughout the game after that first drive. And BYU never turned to another guy. And it wasn't a case of, oh, Bear, you don't have it today. It's just simply, you're hobbled, you're injured, yet they did not turn to the backup. I was having flashbacks of Jaron Hall against Notre Dame in 2022. Not saying that Bear's not good, but the offense was at a standstill, and he's injured. What's the harm in playing someone else to maybe do something for an offense that couldn't do anything? So BYU didn't turn to its backup. Kalani said Bear's going to be fine for the bowl game. We'll see on that. And I would expect with some time to rest, I'm sure he'll be okay. But he was clearly hobbled in that game, and they didn't turn to the backup. So is it an indirect way of saying they don't trust the backups? So clearly you got to add some reinforcements behind Bear Bachmeier for next year. You bring in Enoch Watson, who was going through, who will be joining the program in January. And I saw Enoch at a practice in November. He was slinging the rock with his brother Pearson Watson. I think Enoch has incredible arm talent. Enoch Watson's going to be really good for BYU. And look, it's hard to kind of draw up the path because you got a young Bear Bachmeier, you've got Ryder Lyons in the pipeline, but you always need quarterbacks. And Enoch Watson comes back from a mission. He's going to have a full off season to train. Could he be the number 2 guy next year? Could it be Trayson Bourget, who's still got eligibility? Could he be the number 2 guy? Could it be McKay Hillstead? Does he stay? I just like to think that, you know, guys like McKay Hillstead, I think could be starters somewhere else. So that's why I kind of think in my head, that's probably a potential portal candidate, but we'll see how that plays out. I still think you need to add another quarterback to the mix. You always need to have your ducks in a row and always get another arm talent potentially. And it's tough because these quarterbacks want to be promised the world, but sometimes maybe you can get an under-the-radar QB, maybe from a lower level, add them to the mix and give them an opportunity with years to kind of develop and progress. We'll see how that goes. I think you need interior offensive linemen for BYU out of the portal this year. I like what Bruce Mitchell, first-team All-Big 12 performer, he's going to be your center next season. Bruce is going to be one of the elder statesmen in the program next year. But I kind of look in the mold of Kyle Safarachuk, an under-the-radar player that was added in the last portal cycle, but was impactful. Go back to the Arizona game. He gets the fumble recovery in that win over Arizona to keep BYU's possession alive to go win that game. Guys like Kyle Safarachuk are needed every year in the portal, and I think BYU could add some reinforcements there. Maybe also at offensive tackle, but I really like the young personnel that BYU has at tackle with Andrew Gentry. He's going to be back as a senior. He's got eligibility remaining. Ethan Thomason, a redshirt freshman, bullish on him and Andrew Williams. I honestly think Thomason and Williams could be, the starters. Like if Gentry wanted to move on and declare for the draft or something along those lines, not saying he will, but again, you can never just confidently say this guy is back. Everyone's got the option to leave. But you got Ethan Thomason, you got Andrew Williams, and you got Bot Molitalo, who is going to be expected to come in and compete right away. And you heard Kalani Sitake on signing day say Bot Molitalo is in the mold physically like Kingsley Suamataia and Penei Sewell. Yes, Bot Molitalo is going to come in and at the low end expect to compete for a second string spot. Then you've also got Jake Griffin at offensive tackle, Caden Chittister as well. I think there's good options at tackle. It's the interior of the offensive line that needs a little bit of work. You got Sonny Makassini returning, Bruce Mitchell, Kyle Safarachuk. That's probably your starters. But then kind of building out the depth That's where there needs to be some additional reinforcements for BYU if you can turn to those guys into the portal. On the defensive side, defensive tackle, that's an area to me where BYU's got to bolster that position group. We'll see what happens with Keanu Tanavasa. He goes through senior day. He's got 1 year of eligibility remaining. I think it would be great if Keanu returned next season, but I also understand he's an older prospect. At some point, you want to go take a crack at the NFL and see what you can do. We'll see there. Anisi Purcell is back. Justin Kirkland is back. You've got some young guys at the D tackle spot like Ulavai Fetuli, who recently converted to the church. But I think it's kind of a young, you need a little more depth there. An under-the-radar guy that to me is really interesting is Alvin Puefua, who transferred from Hawaii last year in the 2025 portal cycle. He got banged up in fall camp. Puefua, I think, could be a really good player for BYU. That's no one's talking about him. Like last year, I was talking about John Tamoipeau. No one was talking about him. Alvin Puefua could be a really good player for BYU in the interior and emerge as a standout type guy. But I think you need to get another D tackle or two out of the portal if you're BYU. And I'd also say, too, outside linebacker. Now, I think the linebacker is really good. We'll see what happens with Glasgow. You bring back Che Bryant Strother. He's an interior inside linebacker guy. Max Alford comes back. Cialia Serra. Miles Hall, who was getting a lot of run in the Big 12 championship game. I like the inside backers. You also bring in Owen Borg off a mission. He gray-shirted this past year. Inside backers I like a lot. It's maybe kind of the outside backers where I just think there could be a little bit of reinforcements added there because you lose Jack Kelly. You potentially lose Isaiah Glasgow. Ace Kafusi's really good. Ephraim Asiata, redshirted this year, dealing with a hand injury. He goes to that Sam linebacker position. He could be big time, but still haven't seen anything through 2 years that says he's an every down reliable guy. So it's still a little bit of potential based. Pearson Watson, I think, is going to be special for BYU. I like Tyler Payne as well. He could be an inside backer as well. You got Braxton Lindsay, who could be a defensive end, outside linebacker. They could play him at a lot of different spots. I just think that it's a lot of potential base. There's not proven commodities that you look at right now if Isaiah Glasgow leaves. So, and I'd love to see Glasgow run it back for another season. I think it would serve him well, but you never know where guys' mindsets are at. And sometimes, too, with older prospects who have been around for a handful of years, they're just like, you know what? I'm ready. I'm ready for the next chapter in my life. Football is a grind, man. It is not easy, the grind that takes place. I mean, the 2026 football season doesn't start in September. It starts in January. We're a few weeks away from that. And with a late bowl game on December 27th, winter conditioning will start a few weeks after. And then before we know it, we're about less than 3 months away until spring ball kicks off. Like 2026 football season is almost here. So it is not just an easy thing where you say, I'm coming back and I'll see you in 9 months. No, it is a long ordeal to get ready for these football seasons. And sometimes guys are just ready for the next chapter. And I totally get that. Same time, I'd like to see some of these guys return because with BYU and the enhanced NIL commitments that have been reported for Kalani Sitake as part of his extension, it'd be great to see these players run it back one more time and get another season because I think that could just round into form and not turn to the portal if some of these guys do come back. I like the cornerback position. I think it's always good to maybe get one guy at least every portal cycle. But you look at the personnel potentially in 2026, Evan Johnson's back, Tavion Beasley at nickel, Marcus McKenzie. It's been a little bit up and down year with injuries for Marcus. Really the past 2 years. Kevin Doe, I'm talking about the upperclassmen here with seniors and juniors. Trey Alexander, he goes into his junior season. Jonathan Cabella, this season counted as a redshirt year for Cabella. He didn't play in the UCF game, so he only played 4 games in the regular season. This year was a redshirt, and I'm glad about that because he missed all the games up until the Utah game. So Cabella red shirts, and he's got all that experience and tons of potential. This was a little bit of a transition year for Cabella, considering the injury in fall camp. I expect bigger things in the future for him with still 3 years of eligibility remaining. And then Jordan Chris, Cannon DeVries, Justice Braithwaite comes into the mix. I like the cornerbacks, and there's so much continuity if all those guys stay together and do not go into the portal. I think that could be a really good group for BYU next season. Same with safety, Raider Mooney, Tommy Parasis, Falatau Satuwala. Satuwala might be one of the best safeties in the Big 12 next season. Matthias Leach, he's going to be a good one to watch. Jaron Kalama, Peyton Van Steensky, Matthew Mason, TJ Johnson coming into the mix. You also got Joseph Douglas, who I believe was a walk-on with Texas Tech back in the day. He's also part of the program. So safety position, I think, is in a really good spot. And then the specialists, too. You know, Matthias Dunn at kicker. Kalani Sitake pointed out that he had an excellent fall camp. You would assume he takes on the role in his senior year as the starting kicker. You also bring back from a mission Brody Laga, who they gave a scholarship to out of high school. He had a big leg in high school. And then at punter, Fuller Shirts. Not the greatest debut for Fuller when he got the nod against TCU, but he's part of the group. And then Ty Smith, long snapper, he's also part of the team too. So I feel pretty good about specialist, cornerback, and secondary at large. I think all those other positions, though, as I laid out, are some areas of need for BYU. And look, I think BYU has got a really nice core to work with for 2026. But with these reported enhanced resources for Kalani Sitake, let's see it play out. Because typically with the portal, Kalani and his staff have usually gone to guys that they have a prior relationship with. And I think you still go to that because the culture still has to be a top priority. That has to be paramount for BYU and its football program. But maybe you can swing a little bit bigger in the portal with some enhanced resources and go get some big fish out of the portal for a position of need. And I look at, like a defensive tackle spot. Offensive linemen are hard to come by. Those spots would be really big. I'd also say, too, and I didn't bring this up earlier, tight end, you maybe go to another portal spot, but at some point you want to see some of these young guys emerge. You've got Kean Need coming back. He's more of a blocker, really wasn't targeted at all in the passing game. Anthony Olson, we've heard his name for a long time. He's heading into his senior year. I don't know what to make there on Olson, who really hasn't made a dent into the too deep. Ethan Wood, redshirted this year. Noah Moeaki had glimpses early in the season. Moeaki was targeted, but really that fizzled out as far as the passing game is concerned with Moeaki. Pretty good blocker, though. Will Zundel, a really good special teams guy. Does he make any sort of role on the tight end unit? I thought he was one of the under the radar players in fall camp at the tight end position. If you want to go to a sleeper, I'd say Zundel could be a guy potentially for BYU. Tucker Kelleher, Jacob Nye. Jacob Nye was suited up at the Big 12 championship game. And then you got a freshman, Ty Getch, who is expected to play 1 year before then serving a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in 2027, 2028, and then comes back in 2029. So again, that's all personal choice for players, what their timeline is for missions. But initially, I'm penciling him in as a 2026 guy at the tight end spot. And he could be someone, I think, from the jump, could be an impact player for BYU as a 4-star tight end signee. So that's a spot, too, where I'd probably add another guy to replace Carson Ryan because he will be a big loss for this team. But that's going to do it for this edition of Cougar Tracks. I hope all of you enjoyed it. Make sure to subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcast and like and subscribe to the KSL Sports YouTube. Like this video. It would help out the show a ton. I'll talk to you next time here on Cougar Tracks, and it's powered by KSL Sports.